Greetings from the Philippines to the world. We are on Facebook Live on Eagle News and also on our streaming site eaglenewslive.com. Watch us on our YouTube channel at Eagle News. I am Cesar Vallejos. Welcome to Open for Business. Join me discover the latest news and information in business around the world. Stay ahead of the curve from vision to action. Today, we continue our discussion on the importance of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, to the Philippines. In APEC, the voice of business is the ABAC, or the APEC Business Advisory Council. ABAC provides advice to economic leaders, recommending policy and regulatory reforms, including recommendations on trade and investment issues, and shares ideas to ministers how to address challenges faced by businesses. In the Philippines, ABAC's work is focused on MSMEs, services, infrastructure, finance, and digital innovation that contribute to the region-wide APEC vision and the needs of businesses in the Philippine context. Today's episode features one of the members of ABAC Philippines who will provide insights on how the Business Council helps in achieving the free trade area in Asia Pacific and how APEC and ABAC provide benefits and opportunities to all. Before our interview with Mr. Guillermo, here is our feature on the main summit of the Philippine Startup Week 2019, showcasing the Filipino startup community to the world, organized by the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Trade and Industry, the Department of Information and Communications Technology, and Kubo Philippines. Watch this interview.
The Philippine Innovation Act and the Innovative Startup Act, both of which will further advance innovation in our country.
Focus of the Philippine strategy, and really it's an area that can't be ignored anywhere you go in the world.
The DICT is also responsible in promoting trade and investment opportunities in the ICT sector, including startups.
The difference and the reason why you hire somebody these days, it's all in the mind. It's about the mindset.
The Philippine Innovation Index worldwide has already risen about 20 spots just in the last year alone. And that's because of events like Philippine Startup Week, which is the first of its kind ever. There are 50 events in 11 cities taking place simultaneously. There are 35 people here from Iligan alone, from the startup hub there called IDEA. Because as they said, walang ganito sa Iligan, so they're all here and they're enjoying themselves. And it's true of many parts of the country. I'm really surprised at the turnout. Speaking for Kubo, for example, they're the ones organizing Philippine Startup Week. And so they've been really working very hard to make sure that all these events that are taking place simultaneously work well and that we're as inclusive as possible. So we're all working together, all the different incubators. In addition, Kubo is part of the DOST 4.0 PBI program, in which we're supposed to help 12 incubators around the country and lift them up so that they can, one, get more international links, expose their startups overseas so that they can get funding, so that they can get new ideas, and second, to link them up with the private sector here so that Philippine private companies can invest in these startups. Because our hope is not only will these startups help in these situations like Bato and Marawi, but they will make money. They will create wealth for themselves, their employees, and for the country. I think we're on the brink of achieving it. My outlook is very optimistic. We do need financing, but I can tell you any number of stories of Philippine startups that have successful, what we call exits. It's really a different world now. from the one that I grew up in and that many others grew up in. And it's changing our lives, even as we speak. So many industries are getting disrupted. But that's eventually good for us because, as you said, we're very creative. We just need the financing. We need Filipino parents to tell their children that it's okay to fail. They should take risks. Because in the past, as they've said to others, huwag ka na umalis dyan, okay na yan. May sweldo ka naman eh. So, I mean, that's okay. But what we're telling them is take a risk, take a chance, start a company, and create a success story that we can all be proud of.
Canada is a founding member of APEC. EBC is represented by our Canada Bureau. In this report, our Canada Bureau talks with an entrepreneur from Vancouver whose business is a food truck that showcases Filipino food and Filipino-inspired dishes for both Pinoys and Canadian communities there. Here is the story.
Do you like pandesal, adobo, or tocino, but with a twist? Shameless Buns here in Vancouver got you covered. Vancouver's funkiest food jeepney is serving Vancouverites a little taste of Filipino. It may not be your typical Filipino food. That is no problem because the inspiration is still Filipino cuisine.
So Shameless Buns is a food truck that's all about showcasing Filipino flavors and Filipino food in a really different way than most people probably have experienced with Filipino food before. So we started the business because me personally, being a non-Filipino, fell in love with the cuisine. We created it because we wanted to take this cuisine that, in our opinion, is really misrepresented, that not a lot of people are familiar with, and make it kind of cool and make it kind of fun and funky. We saw that there was a real kind of void in Vancouver for this type of Filipino food.
This food truck is a breath of fresh taste. Here is Matt to explain more about their specialties and how they elevated and kind of tried to westernize the cuisine.
So our most popular dish would be our adobo fries. So it's our chicken adobo. It's essentially one of the national dishes of the Philippines. We braise our chicken adobo for hours and hours until it's literally falling apart. So I describe it to people as almost like a play on pulled chicken. So we take our fries, and I have to note our fries are dusted with the sinigang seasoning. Sinigang is a tamarind-based soup from the Philippines, super popular, very sour, and so our fries almost taste like salt and vinegar chips. We do a lot of stuff with longanisa, so Filipino sausage. You can get it in a sandwich, or you can get it over our fries. With the dish is called the sausage party, so it's basically breakfast on fries. Spam fries are literally as they sound. They are strips of spam cut up into fry formation and deep fried. We have a bunch of dipping sauces, including our garlic calamansi aioli, our sriracha mayo, our smoky maple mayo, and our spicy Filipino vinegar, plus our homemade banana ketchup that we do as well.
Are you hungry yet? There is more that Shameless Bun offers that can also cater vegetarians, all for a quick grab.
So what we came up with was a jackfruit coconut adobo. So what we do is we braise our jackfruit in coconut milk, soy sauce, vinegar, bay leaves, garlic, and there's just this beautiful creamy, tangy. We use pandesal. So as you know, pandesal is the beloved bun of the Philippines, hence why we're called Shameless Buns. Really soft and light and airy. We have the happy ending, which contains a lot of cool Filipino ingredients: homemade ube jam, coconut macapuno, coconut jam, condensed milk, Milo for like a little nostalgic kick.
The creativity that Matt and his girlfriend had put in to fully conceptualize Shameless Bun menu has created a lot of noise, not only among those who haven't tried Filipino food, but most especially to the Filipino community.
I can proudly say that Filipino people love our food. Some of the older generation is sometimes a bit skeptical. They don't see rice on the truck, they don't see lumpia, they don't see pancit, but when they try our food, their minds are usually blown. They absolutely love it.
From Vancouver, Canada, Kathleen Cruz, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
When we return, Mr. Guillermo M. Luz, Associate Director at Ayala Corporation, also the Chief Resilience Officer of the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, and a member of APEC Philippines since 2013, will be in our Open for Business conversation. Stay tuned. We are open for business, and with me is the alternate member of APEC, Mr. Guillermo Luz, and he is also the Associate Director of Ayala Corporation. Bill, thank you very much for
Thank you for having me.
This opportunity. I had the opportunity to speak with the Executive Director of APEC Secretariat in Singapore, Dr. Rebecca Fatima Santa Maria, and she really highlighted the participation of the Philippines. And one, I think the most notable project and initiative that we had during our APEC Philippine year was the Boracay Action Agenda. She was really highlighting this, and she said, because APEC is an economic policy-making body. Before, there's a lot of talk about large organizations benefiting it, but and there's a notion now that before that it's an elitist body. But with the Philippine year, when we had this Boracay Action Agenda, the initiative of the Philippines is for that notion to be changed to make a lot of MSMEs participate in the global chain. Can you cite how important APEC is to the Philippines?
Well, to begin with, among the 21 economies who are members of APEC, they account for just under 40% of the world's population, but almost half the world's trade.
Wow.
And over half the world's GDP, just in 21 economies. Okay? For the Philippines, we get 2/3 of our direct investments from another APEC country, another APEC economy, the other 20. 84% of our exports go to an APEC economy. So we are very, very, shall I say, engaged, connected, almost dependent on APEC. No? We've spread out our 84% of our exports across those economies, and even OFWs.
Yes.
60% of our over 60% of Filipino overseas workers are in an APEC economy. Okay, so if you think that there are 10 million overseas Filipinos, 6 million are somewhere in APEC, working or living in an APEC economy. So they're important to us. Now, when we hosted and chaired APEC back in 2015, we realized, of course, trade is important, and trade is the main theme of APEC, after all, going back to its founding in the 90s, no? So, or in the 80s. So what we did in 2015 is we began to adjust more focus, more emphasis on micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises. So most of the time, people think APEC's for large companies, and it does benefit large companies, of course. But we wanted to add a new dimension on micro, small, and medium-scale enterprise. So the Boracay Action Plan refers to the Trade Ministers meeting, which took place in Boracay in May 2015, and it was at that meeting where it began to be pushed more strongly that let's promote micro, small, and medium-scale enterprise, and let's get them into global value chains. Let them participate more within the supply chain of companies, larger companies, but also let them trade on their own right, okay? As small to small businesses, for instance, or even business to B2C type businesses as well. So they could go.
Sorry, Bill, but before Boracay, was there already a participation of MSMEs, or is it the Philippines who amplified that theme?
Yeah, the Philippines really amplified the theme and almost introduced the theme, and was responsible, together with a few other economies, to really emphasize the importance of MSMEs. Now, across APEC, even in the developed countries, US, Japan, Canada, Australia, Korea, MSMEs are still the backbone of those industries. So, virtually every country, over 90% of businesses are MSMEs. For the Philippines, it's 99.5% are MSMEs. So really only 0.5% are large corporations. So we'd have to be thinking about how to grow MSMEs in number and how to grow them out in terms of their value creation and their jobs. So MSMEs tend to grow faster in jobs, those who survive, so we have to make sure they survive. So by getting them introduced into the global value chain and bringing them up in sort of awareness levels of other APEC economies, then we were providing much more, concentrating more attention. So actually 2 meetings in the Philippines were devoted to MSMEs, not just one. So Boracay was the trade ministers meeting, and then Iloilo, which is around maybe September of the same year, are the SME ministers meeting. Now in other economies, there's really a ministry for MSME. In the Philippines, it's tied to Department of Trade. So,
but do you think it's a high time for us to also have that kind of?
I'm not sure we need another bureaucracy in place. A new department. It's expensive and it's bureaucratic, and it takes time. It takes typically maybe 2 or 3 years to organize a new department from scratch. You have to create the table of organization, hire people, get the budget. So you lose 2 or 3 years. So I would say let's keep it within DTI and expand that focus, which is what they have been doing. So we tackled it twice in 2015.
And with these 2 meetings, what were the outputs? Because Dr. Rebecca also mentioned that it has a time frame. It's about 5 years. But the economies may not necessarily stop on that, but they continue to develop their initiatives based on that.
Correct, yes. So, in broad context, APEC is for free and open trade across the Asia Pacific, regardless of any size of company. Okay? So, this fits in there because it's emphasizing trade for micro, small, and medium scale enterprise. Now, one aspect was to get them involved in more global value chains or supply chains of large companies. The second one was to emphasize more e-commerce. So going digital really helps micro, small, and medium scale enterprise. They can scale up, they can choose their markets, they can target a smaller market, a bigger market. It's really up to them, but it will lower some of their costs for intermediation and for sales. But they have to be geared up for it. It's not as simple as you put up a website and you're ready to go. You have to make sure that you've got the production facility, that you've got the logistics capability, you've got the payment capability. So all these things have started to be emphasized within APEC, targeted at micro, small, and medium scale enterprise. The Philippines was the country or the economy which then created the beginning of what was known as the APEC SME marketplace. So the marketplace started as a listing of the micro, small, and medium scale enterprises in every APEC economy. So since 2015 up to today, there are links being created between the chambers of commerce or the exporters federations or the DTIs of the other economies to link them to lists and directories so you get to know what other MSMEs and products exist outside. That's the first thing. This year, Chile is the host of this year's APEC, and they're the chairman of APEC. So what they've done is they also are very dependent on MSMEs. So they've taken that marketplace and stepped it up and created a transactional, started creating a transactional portal so
I
that they
see.
can trade and actually, because one, it moved from listing to actual transaction.
So initially it was just a plain directory.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Because, I mean, we had to start from scratch, you know, and,
That's right.
and nobody had a directory actually. So the idea was, you know, it's important to know, one, the directory, and number two, the rules.
But okay, but with the directory, anybody can enlist their
Correct.
businesses there.
Yes,
But
yes.
how is admin? I mean, are there specific credentials for you to access that?
Yes, there are. So you have to go to the marketplace, SME marketplace, and that's an APEC product actually. But it's managed by the Philippines, by Department of Trade and Industry, DTI.
I see. Okay.
So you get listed through that facility, the SME marketplace, the APEC SME marketplace. But there are two elements. One is to get to know what companies are on the other side of the of a boundary, of a border. The other is to know the rules. Okay, so you need to know rules. You need to know, you know, customs, duties, regulations, quarantine. You know, there's a lot of rules that you need to know cross-border in cross-border trade. So there is a trade repository also, and that is also managed by Department of Trade. So the listing of all the trade regulations between and among APEC economies are on that website. And if you click on a country, then you get to read all its rules, and it's always updated because it's the countries, the economies, which are updating their own rules, and then not DTI. DTI only is responsible for the Philippines, but there are links, active links to all the other 20 economies. So that's another sort of service, I guess, that's given to MSMEs. And so moving fast forward, say 2015 to 2020, now the Chileans have invited Philippines and Brunei to be partners to move it up to the next level, which is the transactional site. So it's a B2B, basically a B2B type site.
Also on the same portal. It's just a new feature.
No, it'll be a new portal. It'll have to be a new
see.
portal because it's too complicated to change an existing portal. Besides, the first portal is owned by APEC. Okay, so that's APEC. If you want to look at it, it's like a multilateral organization. So the second portal is going to be more private because it's transaction oriented.
That's right. Okay,
So we want to keep away transactions from the multilateral site. So a separate site is created for that. The rules site, the trade repository, it still exists. That is with that's an APEC product. And this year there are moves to create a similar portal on service rules, because you know a lot of small businesses are not really making a product; they're performing a service.
Correct.
Software service, you know, whatever, a healthcare service, an educational service, a tourism service. So there's no physical product that they're moving back and forth as a country. They're selling a service. So there are also rules for services.
So is this similar to, let's say, for example, a BPO service that you outsource a specific?
Yeah, BPO is the best example of a service. So in World Trade speak, in terminology, there are 4 types of services. One service is that you outsource to me. Okay. So you're living in one economy, I'm living in another. You ask me to perform a job, and I do the job and I return it back to you. So that's one type of service. The other service is I will go to your economy and provide a service like a construction service or engineering service in your economy. So it requires me to be the one to move rather than your job to move to me. Right? Your assignment moves to me. It's an intangible assignment. But otherwise, I have to move and perform the job, like construct a building or an oil rig. The third type of service is, say, I open up an office in your economy and I begin performing a service in that economy to a larger, broader public. So there are Philippine companies that do that. You could think of, say, Jollibee, for instance, opens branches abroad, or ICTSI operates ports abroad, or any Philippine investor who goes abroad to perform a service. And the fourth is that you come in you, as a visitor, you come into our country to consume the service. So if you're a tourist, so you come in and go to a tourist destination here, that's a service industry. But it requires you to travel here. You can't experience it virtually. You can, but it's not as good as coming in and experiencing it here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, or let's say you're a patient and you come in to take a health service here.
But of the four services, which has the largest potential as far as the Philippines offering is?
Okay, well, right now the largest are the outsource. So people coming in here to give us a job. You don't have to come in personally. You just give us a job. We perform the job. We send it out. So our BPO industry is worth. They generate over maybe close to $25 billion a year, between $22.5 to $25 billion a year worth of services, and it employs over 1 million people. So that's big, and 1.2 million people. But a large part would also be tourism and the type where you have to come in to experience a service. So you could come in as a tourist, you could come in as a patient for our healthcare services, you could come in as a student for our educational services. Many people come here, learn English, or go to med school, or go to university. Foreigners, so we have a growing number of foreigners here. So they come in and they spend because they have to pay tuition, they have to live here, they have to spend, for their day-to-day expenses here. So that's a big potential. Tourism, we're running about maybe 6 or 7 million visitors a year. We could do much more. Other countries in ASEAN are doing maybe 20 to 25 million people a year. So imagine if we moved up to 10, 15, 20 million people a year visiting, spending money here. That's a booming business, and that leads, that helps support aviation services, transport services, hotel services, food services, hospitality services, entertainment. So there's many things that it has an impact on. So I would say those two are of the four, those two are the largest in terms of impact. You outsource to me, or you come and visit us.
Now, of the four then po, is that the essence or the role of the APEC travel business card?
Not really. The APEC travel business card was meant to facilitate travel of businessmen across the APEC region on a visa-free basis or a fast-track basis. Some countries still require a visa, but you get a fast-track lane, so you don't have to queue to get in. So it's kind of a special privilege given to business people as they cross borders for trade. So the idea was that if their businesses were involved in intra-APEC trade or investments, then they wanted to smoothen your entry and exit into and out of an APEC economy. So, for instance, I carry, because I have to travel within APEC, I carry an APEC business travel card. Right now, that gets me into almost all countries visa-free, which is a huge convenience, because I don't have to go to an embassy to get a visa.
Correct.
I just, take a flight, get in the queue, and you get in quite fast. Now, the APEC business travel card is limited to businessmen, okay? So it's not something that tourists get. And most businessmen who get it right now are large scale businesses, because they're the ones who do the most travel and have most business interests across at least a few of the APEC countries. I don't know too many micro, small, and medium scale enterprise businessmen who actually have an APEC business travel card.
Which is exactly
we should maybe open it up a little bit more.
Yes, which is exactly what the reason I asked Bill is with my conversation with Dr. Rebecca. With that APEC business card, ramdam na agad nung large corporations the impact and the benefits of APEC being a member. But how do we now ensure that the impact of APEC is felt also by the MSMEs? So I think that's my next question. So because kasi sabi rin niya, like we needed the MSME should really coordinate with APEC to make sure that they have very many options in participation. You mentioned 3 already. Like say they can participate in a global chain of a larger corporation, or they can do e-commerce, and the third one they can go direct and do export business. Pero, sabi niya, Bill, MSMEs should also be compliant with the global standards.
Right.
Hindi naman madali yun na
Yeah.
say, okay, I want to export,
Yeah.
and then you have to create really a major, high quality product to
Yeah.
be able to serve the international market. So the question is, what specific projects of ABAC or APEC that should really, have a dent or impact on the lives, on the businesses of MSMEs?
Yeah, well, the first thing I feel is that if we could open up the ABTC, the APEC Business Travel Card, to more MSMEs, that's easier said than done because it requires approval of all the other countries to, they have to vet you when you apply. It's not like you apply to your own Department of Foreign Affairs, but your name has to go out to all the other countries and they have to check you out before they issue you the card, right? So it's a lengthy process, even for large corporations. The second way is really to try to beef up everyone's awareness and service levels and standards regarding e-commerce. So, because if you want to enter the market, I mean, your product's got to be good, and so you got to have some exposure outside, and you've got to be learning what's in demand outside, and use the technology to be able to sell. So there are more and more of these items. As I said, Chile is working on one, but there are many commercial ones available. For APEC.
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
Bill. We continue our discussion. Open for Business will be back. Stay with us. Open for Business is back, and with me is Bill Luz, the member of the ABAC Philippine team and Associate Director of Ayala Corporation. It's a very interesting discussion, and you were, before we went to a break, you were telling me about the possible potential benefits and initiatives that can be done for MSMEs to feel that impact of the APEC benefits.
Sure. So I think one, as I mentioned already, was if we could somehow expand the deployment, the use of the APEC Business Travel Card to MSMEs, because right now traditionally it's been given to larger corporations who travel more and have justification for crossing into APEC economies. But it takes time for the issuance of the card. The second is to beef up the training on the aspects of e-commerce. And the aspects of e-commerce are more than just getting the website and the storefront going, but you have to think about your product quality and your fulfillment, your logistics, your payment. But as you get more exposure, some companies are able to do it and some are not. So as I mentioned, we started with a listing before, marketplace. Now it's being beefed up to something called B2B world. So that's by Chile, and they asked Brunei and Philippines to assist in that regard, and Chile is the lead. But there are commercial sites that people can go to. People may not remember, but once upon a time, Jack Ma of Alibaba was a member of ABAC, representing China. Yeah. Today, Diane Wang is a member of ABAC, representing China again, and she runs an e-commerce site, a portal called dhgate.com. So there are businesses out there. We have UPS, so logistics business, for delivery is on the ABAC US side. So the types of groups that we bring in, who try to help and improve on the e-commerce aspect of MSMEs. A third part, it's sort of not talked about too much, but it is, we feel, a problem that will grow in the future, is online dispute resolution. So let's say there's a dispute between one business and another on an e-commerce case, or between a customer and a business on an e-commerce case, then definitely you will need some form of online dispute resolution. Okay, if there's a customer complaint.
Yes.
Right? So that has to be kind of standardized, maybe, and harmonized a little between the APEC economies.
So right now, who is really doing the settlement?
The settlement is done in wherever your contract says the court in the jurisdiction where,
I see.
you know, it depends on contract to contract. Is it in the seller's jurisdiction or the buyer's jurisdiction, and things like that. So that's one aspect.
So there's no global standard?
Not yet. It's being worked out.
Okay, that's good.
A fourth area is what we call cross-border privacy rules. So, you know, today's business is so digital that your data is not limited to your economy. You're in services, for instance, if you outsource to me, you're giving me data, right? I'm processing the data and I'm giving you back processed data. If there are no rules on privacy affecting that transfer of data to me, the processing and back to you and how we handle it, then there's a trust issue. What do you do with data, right? I mean, if you're holding my data, you know, as an individual, how sure am I that it's going to be protected? So these are the new, what they call cross-border privacy rules, CBPR. That's being discussed within APEC. The Philippines is the 9th country out of 21 to join cross-border privacy rules. So there are still 12 more to go, but we want to be prepared early. Now, most people think that only happens, you know, that only matters to big businesses, but it doesn't. It matters also to small businesses. Because if you're in e-commerce, you're handling data, right?
Yes.
You're transferring data. You're getting payment data from of your customer. You're shipping data. You get their address. There's a lot of stuff. So if you don't have that privacy rule protection, your customers may not trust you. So we've got to eventually begin to teach even MSMEs privacy rules. Now, big companies have obvious privacy rule implications as well. If you're in banking or you're holding health records or engineering records or educational records of people, you know, just about any data. Everything is data today. Everything's digitized. The smallest transaction, that's digitized. So it's got to cover under privacy rules. Europe already has its own GDPR. So this will take care sort of between GDPR and CBPR. That's pretty well the world.
So meaning the CBR is our version of the GDPR?
Yeah, that's the APEC version of GDPR. Yeah.
It's interesting. But you mentioned earlier that the Philippines is the 9th country to join that. So are you, the way APEC does it, its business, you have to sign up all the 21 member economies before it's finalized?
Not necessarily. Sometimes what happens is that those who sign begin implementing, and then there are guys who add on. So if you take a look at things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that involved only 12 countries, not 21.
Out of 21.
21,
okay.
right. So the 12 countries had to come to a decision, the 12 economies came to a decision on their implementation, not having to wait for the final 9. In fact, they stopped accepting so they could fix, you know, get used to the rules and then begin accepting them later. So they're still at the stage where they're only in the very, very early stage having, they have to get each economy to ratify the rules. They haven't done that yet for 12. So it's the same for RCEP, you know, RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So that's ASEAN plus maybe ASEAN plus about 11. There's, I think, 20 or 21 economies there. So it's not really APEC. That's more ASEAN and partners. India's there, China's there, I think Japan, Korea. So that's a slightly bigger grouping than TPP. But the point is that they don't wait for 100% to get in before it takes effect. Those who sign begin to shape the rules and follow the rules and implement the rules. Others follow in the future.
But even if the member economies ratify it, is it still non-binding?
Well, yes, in the sense that APEC's agreement of non-binding means that they don't sign an agreement among all 21 that requires them to then ratify it within their own Congress or Parliament. But they have that agreement, and it's by consensus, generally on the trade agreements. No? So CPBR, something that will grow, but there are other agreements that are by consensus, like free trade, you know, FTAP and Bogor Goals. They are agreed by all 21. They're not necessarily ratified they don't have to be ratified in Congress or Parliament. And the value of the non-binding arrangement is that actually it frees up people to discuss ideas. Okay, so when you're binding, if everything's binding, you tend to be a little more guarded and kind of legalistic about the way you will sign off. Take a look at the way WTO works. So the pace in WTO is a lot different from the pace in a non-binding arrangement, because it has more countries to begin with, and then more agreements. So you can imagine every provision having to be approved, or every document having to be approved across a wide number of countries. So ASEAN, it's also binding, but it's a smaller number of countries. It's 10, and ASEAN is effective in that sense because we're just a big region in population, but in economies it's only 10. In fact, originally 5, right? So from there, it's easy to get that consensus and that agreement. So APEC's 21, so it's a little bigger, and there's a wider disparity in economic levels. You have very big countries: U.S., Japan, China, Korea, Australia, with very high per capita income, Singapore, and then very small ones, Philippines, Vietnam.
So with APEC, since it's non-binding, there's can we say a freer discussion, or maybe?
Yeah, the discussion is very free, very open. It allows them to inject a lot of ideas into into discussions, and then they slowly work around those ideas and move towards consensus. And then the way they implement based on the consensus, they kind of have flexibility and freedom to implement in certain ways. And that flexibility includes a time flexibility sometimes. So in the case of free trade area, the Asia Pacific, developed countries had a more aggressive schedule versus developing countries, because developing countries have to catch up. So you have to allow for some catching up. Philippines is one of those countries where you need a catch up, little breathing room for catch up.
With the many developments since we hosted APEC, and us being in media, and we were there, and we really saw the huge impact of APEC to MSMEs as well. What are now the projects of APEC, or what are your future initiatives that you think would ensure that all these initiatives will be continued? And like say for example, the Boracay Action Plan or Action Agenda, and she reiterated, Dr. Rebecca said, the Philippines did a good job in championing the MSME development, the Boracay Action Agenda. So, in your as an APEC member for 2 generations, how do you think should the Philippines sustain these initiatives and ensure that we continue to champion this?
The APEC meetings, we meet 4 times a year, and they're structured meetings and discussions around several themes. And so each theme is parked inside a working group. So there's a working group on sustainable development, one on finance and economics, one on MSMEs, one on infrastructure, and I think basically those are the ones. So we have picked from that long list, we picked for the Philippines what our areas are that we want to promote to make the Philippines stronger in. So MSME is definitely one of them. We want to develop our MSME sector. We are helping on the marketplace and the e-commerce side of things, because that's where we think the promise is for MSMEs. On the side, we're also helping on the online dispute resolution, but it's really development of MSMEs. That's our focus within APEC, okay? Representing APEC Philippines and Philippine interests within APEC. In the area of infrastructure and finance, there's 2 projects we've looked at closely, and this ties to sustainable development. One of them has to do, because the Philippines is vulnerable to natural disaster.
Yes.
One of them has to do with creation of a catastrophe bond market. So it's kind of a form of risk and insurance against natural disaster. And because we're hit by so many, we might as well be a little prepared for that. We're not the only one. There are other countries within APEC also have a lot of natural disasters. So within Asia, there's ourselves, Indonesia, Vietnam, Hong Kong, China. So we're the types, Taiwan, Chinese Taipei, we're the types get hit by typhoons. So we sustain damage. On the South America side, Mexico and Chile and Peru, they're also susceptible sometimes to cyclones, but also to earthquakes. So they have developed a catastrophe bond market for Latin America. So we thought of one for more Asia-centric. So that's another.
What's the mechanics of this? Who participates and who benefits
well,
from this market?
you you create a bond which you then sell off to investors in the market, and those bonds will earn. They will be managed and they'll be invested, but if a natural disaster of a certain magnitude strikes, the bond pays out like insurance, right, to cover cost of damage and reconstruction and recovery. So the benefit, of course, is going to be the country to do it. But investors, it's made with an incentive for investors to come in to invest in the bonds. So those are just examples of projects we have. On the digital innovation side, which is the fifth working group, that has an impact on several areas. One is that will impact on the jobs of the future. So today's jobs will be very different. 10 years from now, jobs will look very different.
That's right. Actually, that's one of the topics when we went to the NUS. We talked about data science, which weren't existing
10 years ago, maybe.
10 years ago, yes.
And much more. So, data science, analytics, artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning, all these things are changing jobs. There's much more. It's not just automation that will affect assembly lines and in manufacturing, but it will affect many other sectors as well, including the farm sector. So, everything from robotics to artificial intelligence, how will that impact on jobs anywhere in the world, actually? And additionally, the question in our mind is, how should we plan our educational and training system to address those needs in the future when we cannot even predict what the specific job will be? So we've got to be very good at educating and training people so they can continuously be trainable and flexible and adaptive to new technology that comes down. So someone who starts at grade 1 today, but if they finish grade 12 and go through 4 more years of college, how relevant is what they learn today going to be in the future? Actually,
but is there a collaboration between the private sector, maybe like ABAC or APEC, with educational institutions?
Well, that's what we're trying to build up now, because we have to have that link between industry and academia.
That's right.
Because as it is, people who enter freshman year, by the time they're seniors, whatever job they were thinking of getting, by the time they're seniors, that job may not exist, or a whole bunch of new jobs will exist that they're not prepared for. So we've got to work with the educational sector, but we have to also work with the training sector, meaning the vocational training side of things as well, because even that's becoming much more digitized, I would say. It's no longer it's no longer a brute strength type of job. It's a job that is helped along with technology and machinery and things like this. So that requires a skill. I mean, if you're unskilled labor, then you're taking the lowest on the value chain versus if you're someone who knows how to use all these tools. That's different. So that's a big area of discussion within APAC and of course within the Philippines. That's of interest to us because we have a young population. So it could be an advantage to us. If we train and educate people properly, we have the workforce. We can attract people to come here. We can send people out. So we need to find out how can we turn what is seemingly a disadvantage into an advantage in the future. We've got this young educated workforce that is larger than many in the region, but we have to keep them educated to a certain level. If we don't do that, we're not able to take advantage of of that, they get a benefit from that advantage. So that's another area that we are working on. Finally, we've looked at infrastructure finance. So there's a lot of infrastructure finance available in the world. So that gives you an idea of some of the projects we look at. Just where we spend more of our time on that than on other things that we don't want to worry too much about. There's too many projects in APEC, so we only pick 4 or 5 that we want to work on.
My last 2 questions, Bill, before we go. There's a lot of global headwinds. Of course, we're experiencing the global tension. So, how is the Philippines preparing for this? A lot of the ones who are involved are our trading partners. So, how do we position ourselves to ensure that we continue to prosper despite the trade tensions happening around us?
Yeah, I think we have to realize that we are, trade is a big part of the Philippine economy. And as I said, most of the trade, the exports, and actually the imports, but the exports go to an APEC economy. So we need to make sure that we, just like the rest of the economies, advocate the reduction of trade tensions, advocate the acceleration of trade agreements, the resolution of issues within WTO, for instance, any delays there. We're consistent among the APEC economies to promote that, and the Philippines is aligned with that position. We need to maintain very good relationships and contacts across the APEC economies. We can't afford to be leaning too heavily on just 1 or 2 at the risk of shutting ourselves out of markets in other APEC economies. So this is where foreign policy becomes important, because foreign policy at the end of the day is also economic policies, economic foreign policy, and economic diplomacy. So we have to be aware that we need to remain good friends with as many of our large trading partners. Now, who are the large trading partners for the Philippines? Well, they are, and they are the U.S., China, you have Japan, probably those are the big 3. But we still do significant trade, with other countries within APEC, Korea, Australia, Canada. So we need to maintain those relationships. The minute we are kind of leaning towards one direction too much and cutting ourselves off from the others, I think does not work for the Philippines. In this case, we're the small country. It's not like we're 2 big giants fighting. That's different. We're a small country that needs as many trading friends as possible. We need to maintain trading friends, and that should be our economic and foreign policy track, I would say.
Okay, perfect. Now, APEC Chile is happening this coming November with the theme Connecting People, Building the Future. What do we expect from Chile?
Well, good for us. The Chilean vision is very similar to what we have in the Philippines. Connecting people, we were definitely for that. And at the end of the day, it's this connectivity, which is everything that goes from people-to-people exchange to digital connectivity to physical connectivity to trade connectivity. That's important for all of us, but it's important for Chile because it's a small country relative to others, okay, and just like us, though it has a much higher per capita income than we do. But it's a trade-dependent country, just like us, and it's dependent. It's built on small and medium-scale enterprise, so they have a very strong emphasis on MSMEs, and so for that we are completely aligned. They're also aligned on women, the role of women in the economy, and that's something the Philippines has always been into. We're a very open society in that sense. We have a lot of women entrepreneurs, a lot of women business executives, and women play a very big role in the Philippines. In fact, on the World Economic Forum's gender gap report, we're ranked quite high as having the smallest gender gap, one of the smaller gender gaps. Certainly in ASEAN we have the smallest gender gap, but worldwide we're still maybe number 5, number 4, number 5 in the gender report of World Economic Forum, which is pretty good. And so with Chile, that's also what they are emphasizing. Digital, of course, they are as concerned about that as we are, not only in the future of jobs, but of course, because Chile, in the scheme of things, is very far away from APEC physically. I mean, we're going there, in November, and it's a 34-hour flight one way. So, it's a day and a half, right, to get there. So, I mean, we complain, but actually most of the meetings in APEC take place in Asia, most. Okay, so they're the ones who are actually taking the trouble, maybe this year, 3 times this year, they took that 34-hour trip because our meetings happen to be in Asia. And one in the US is a little shorter, but we're the ones now going there. And so it's far, so connectivity is important for a country like Chile to be able to think across the Pacific. How do they trade with the rest of Asia Pacific? So we have a lot of similarities, and being a Latin country, we get along well with Latin countries as well, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Luz has a lot of other roles, and I hope he can join us again in future episodes of Open for Business so he can discuss other initiatives that he has. And we'd like to thank Mr. Guillermo Luz, the alternate member of the APEC Business Advisory Council Philippines and Associate Director of Ayala Corporation. There are a lot of MSMEs, business owners, and even young entrepreneurs who are watching. Can you just give your entrepreneurial tips to them, being in business for several years?
Yeah, well, I would say the first thing is to be very persistent and have a great sense of belief in your product or your service, and to build it up to a very high quality, to a world-class quality. Because if you want to enter the global economy, or if you want to enter even APEC, you've got to have that quality and have that attitude and that persistence to be able to thrive in that arena. But I'm confident that Filipinos can, because we've seen it happen, and we've come across a lot of successful Filipinos abroad. So if they can do it, I can't see why you can't do it.
Open for Business will be back. Stay with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
In our term of the week, you take a refresher of business terms to make you updated, more informed, and ready to make smarter business decisions. Our term of the week is Free Trade Agreement, or FTA. A free trade agreement is a pact between 2 or more nations to reduce barriers to imports and exports among them. Under a free trade policy, goods and services can be bought and sold across international borders with little or no government tariffs, quotas, subsidies, or prohibitions to inhibit their exchange. The concept of free trade is the opposite of trade protectionism or economic isolationism. And our word of the week is from George Osborne. He said, "The biggest single thing that has lifted people out of poverty is free trade." Thank you for watching Open for Business. Join us again in the next episodes of Open for Business for more insights from CEOs, thought leaders, and industry experts promoting business development in the Philippines. See you again next Saturday and Sunday for another episode of Open for Business, where we discuss business information, deliver the latest business news to keep you informed and open for business, and be ahead of the curve from vision to action. You're on Facebook Live on Eagle News, and you can watch us again in the video section of the Eagle News Facebook page and on eaglenewslive.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Eagle News. Thank you very much to all our speakers and sponsors and partners at the EBC Open House and Trade Fair. Watch out for our upcoming forum on explaining blockchain and cryptocurrency. Keep watching us for more details. For Open for Business, this is Cesar Vallejos. Have a great day.